Some leaders don't struggle with setting expectations, they struggle with enforcing them. And that distinction actually matters more than people realize. Because when every direction you give turns into a discussion, something deeper is happening. And expectations are no longer being treated as standards, they're being treated as proposals. Now, that shift doesn't happen all at once, it happens one conversation at a time. So let's have a real conversation about what it's like dealing with difficult people. Now, I'm Brenda Neckvatal, and I help the strongest leaders deal with the messiest people. Early in my career, I thought clarity, that would solve everything, and it helps out a lot. Clarity is super important in leadership, and I believe that if I explained expectations better, people would align. If I gave enough context, enough reasoning, enough background, the resistance would disappear. So I explained more and more and more and more. And what I learned the real hard way was this: over explaining does not create buy-in, it actually creates openings, gaps, because explanation invites interpretation, and interpretation invites negotiation. And negotiation doesn't work very well when you need to have people stepping up to meet expectations. So here's the patterns that leaders, if they do this, they'll get to know really, really well. You set an expectation, it's clear, it's reasonable, and it's aligned with the role. Someone asks a question, sounds fair and it sounds curious, and it also sounds like it could potentially be collaborative. So you answer it. Then another question follows, and then another. And then one sounds reasonable on its own, but something starts to subtly shift. And the focus moves away from the expectation itself onto the conversation around it. So by the time the discussion ends, the standard now feels like it's optional. Not because you changed it, because you defended it. So this is one of the most common forms of toxic behaviors that leaders overlook because it hides. It hides behind curiosity, it hides behind collaboration, and it hides behind engagement. It doesn't look hostile because leaders tolerate it. But every debate starts to chip away at your authority. Even justification trains the room to believe that standards are negotiable. Teams feel this like super immediately. They watch how much discussion it takes for something to stick. And they notice who can slow things down by asking the right questions. And they learn which expectations hold and which ones collapse under pressure. So group dynamics shift. Meetings become circular instead of decisive. Momentum disappears, progress stalls, and high performers disengage. Not because they don't care, because they're tired of waiting for conversations to end before execution begins. So this is when leadership becomes exhausting. Every conversation feels like a negotiation. Every direction requires explanation. Every boundary invites debate. And leaders start questioning themselves. Am I being unclear? Am I too rigid? Am I not collaborating enough? Right? The issue isn't communication, it's authority erosion. Now, my turning point came when I realized something very critical. Expectations lose power the moment they're debated, not because the questions are bad, because the timing matters. So there's a difference between understanding an expectation and agreeing to renegotiate it. So once I separated those two moments, everything started to change. Strong leaders define expectations once, and then they reinforce them without defending. They answer the questions that clarify execution. They redirect questions that challenge the standard itself. They don't argue, they anchor. And this is where most leaders will really get uncomfortable because they've been taught that good leadership is collaborative at all times. Well, collaboration has its place, and decision making has its place, and certainly execution has its place. When those get blurred, confusion grows. Strong leaders don't shut people down, they close the conversation. They bring discussions back to the outcomes. They say, this is the expectation, here's how we execute it, and then they move forward. Leaders often worry this approach will make them seem rigid or unapproachable. And the opposite is totally true because consistency is what actually creates trust. We've learned that in previous videos. So when people know expectations won't be renegotiated in real time, conversations become cleaner and faster. And there's less posturing, there's less testing, and there's less resistance because the rules of engagement are very, very clear. The cost leaders overlook is cumulative. Time drains away in endless discussions, and discussions stall while debates linger. Authority is what weakens quietly. Dealing with difficult people becomes exhausting because every conversation feels like it's a power struggle that's disguised as dialogue. So toxic behavior spreads. Others start testing the same boundary. More questions appear, more resistance will follow. And not because people are being malicious, but because the system taught them that debate works. They want to see where your boundaries are weak and where they can push. So if you feel like you're constantly explaining yourself, start paying attention to what you're saying, because that's not engagement. That is erosion at its best. Your team is watching how you handle these moments, and they learn whether direction is stable or up for debate. They will learn whether leadership holds under pressure or opens under questioning. Culture forms around how quickly leaders step into justification mode. And this is why leaders can say the right things and still feel very out of control because values don't enforce themselves, expectations don't hold themselves. Leaders do. So if you want expectations to stick without escalating or shutting people down, you don't need sharper arguments. You need stronger boundaries. Boundaries aren't emotional, they're structural. They tell people where discussion ends and execution begins. And this is exactly why I built my app. I built it for moments just like this, moments when leaders feel pulled into debates that they never intended to have, moments when expectations start drifting into negotiation, and moments when authority needs reinforcement, not explanation. And the app gives leaders grounded language that keeps conversations focused on execution instead of control. And it helps leaders respond without escalating, shrinking, or even over explaining. So if you're dealing with difficult people, toxic behavior, or group dynamics that keep turning direction into debate, this matters. So you can access the app at askbrendahow.com. And expectations, remember, they're not invitations, they are commitments. And the moment you stop debating them, leadership starts getting easier. Not louder, certainly not harsher, just clearer. And that clarity, that is what strong teams are built on.